If I can go back to our guest one more time on this segment of the broadcast. Ambassador Bhattacharya, your thoughts on the meeting that is taking place as we speak in the White House. In terms of outcomes, you think it will tick all the right boxes for you in the next hour or so?
Excited and at the same time optimistic about this meeting. This is a meeting which has been made with very careful preparation. It marks a very significant point where India and the United States are engaging so early on in a new administration. And it also reflects the shared aspirations and hopes of how the two of them can contribute to not only each other's futures, but also to broader regional and global security issues. I know that President Trump and Prime Minister have a very close personal rapport, and I think the preparations have been made to transform that particular personal rapport into a broader understanding for the two countries. And I'm sure during the meeting they will come forward with new consensus that will be beneficial for both sides. I'm very, very optimistic.
Indeed. And Mr. Kumar, your thoughts on what to expect from that meeting with President Trump in terms of outcomes, especially from your vantage? You've been tracking the relationship from very close quarters.
Jari mentioned that I'm also optimistic about the meeting between the two leaders. And as I mentioned previously, I expect that there would be a new roadblock decided, I mean, between the two leaders, and that's what the job of the main leaders are, to give directions or to, in a way, to give a direction to the bilateral engagement between the two countries of what that would be for next 4 to 5 years. Because we remember this is the final term for President Trump in the office, and Prime Minister Modi's third term will also complete in 2029. So it's a kind of a coterminous term for both the leaders. So they would want to maximize on this partnership, the personal bonhomie that they have, the personal rapport they have built. So, and since the meeting is coming right at the very beginning, not even a month since President Trump has taken the office, the meeting is coming. So I expect a good roadmap from both sides, maybe something on trade, but a broad roadmap on trade, investment, energy, tech, defense, outlining or guiding, giving a guidance to for the further negotiations or further engagements between the two sides, and that should lead up to the Quad Summit, which India will host towards the maybe second half of the year.
All right, I'm told this is where I say thank you to you, Ambassador Bhattacharya, and you, Mr. Kumar, for joining us on this special broadcast. Thank you for your time, much appreciated. I still have with me my colleague Shubhendu Ghosh, who is standing by in Washington, D.C. for more on this developing story. Remember, just to recap for the benefit of our viewers, Prime Minister Modi has arrived at the White House for that much anticipated meeting with President Donald Trump. We'll get you the latest from that meeting in just a bit. But if I can go back to my colleague Shubhendu for more on those talks which are taking place as we speak. Shubhendu, if you are still with us and can hear me, you're discussing about the diaspora before we let our guests leave. I want to sort of build on that point. In your interaction with the diaspora there over the last several days in DC, Shubhendu, what are some of the expectations from this meeting in terms of maybe the immigration issue or the visa issue, or generally what the perception of India has gone up in the US, the elite circle, so to speak, over the last many decades?
That's right, Ramesh. For the diaspora, it was a double an opportunity to celebrate. They said it is always special when Prime Minister Narendra Modi comes calling to the United States, but this time over, he's going to be joined by President Donald Trump, who they also think is one of the best leaders in the United States from the India perspective. That they think that President Donald Trump values the kind of contribution that Indians make in the American society. In that sense, there is a great degree of confidence. There is also a certain celebratory note when they refer to President Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi coming together. But at the same time, besides these reasons to rejoice, there are some real concerns, especially with reference to immigration, as I mentioned earlier. There are thousands of Indian professionals who come to the United States. They sometimes come as students. Then they want to stay here, find a job, make a future. There is a process through which visa and immigration works, H-1B. Their aspiration is that it is turned into a more merit-based system, not a lottery-based system. I was speaking to a student, a second-year MBA student yesterday, who says that she already has a multiple job offers from top US companies. She's a business management. She's going to be a business management graduate soon. But her fate hangs on the manner in which the H-1B visa lottery turns out. So she argued that the process should be made a little more systematic. There should be more certainty that brings in. Many of the students spend millions of rupees and to come to the United States, to pay the fees. There's a lot of investment in education in the United States. It's best in the world, but it's also expensive. So in that sense, when they make that kind of an investment, they seek more stability in terms of the opportunity that they can build upon. So that particular section of the diaspora in particular are hoping that Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump put together, iron out these areas of concern. Otherwise, broadly, the diaspora is very, very excited about this first meeting of Prime Minister Modi in the new term of President Donald Trump, and they're quite confident that the decisions, the roadmap they present is going to be a win-win for people of both the countries.
Right, and just to recap again for the benefit of viewers tuning in, it is getting to 3 a.m. India time or 4:30 in the afternoon in Washington DC, and Prime Minister Modi has arrived at the White House for his meeting with President Trump. We'll get you the latest from that meeting in just a bit. But while we wait for our guests to join this second hour of our broadcast, we're expecting two more guests to join us in just a bit. But let me go back to my colleague Shubhendu, who is in DC as we speak, tracking every aspect of the visit of the Indian leader to the US. Shubhendu, talking a bit more about the diaspora. Now, we've heard some of the diaspora talk about how Prime Minister Modi has changed the perception of India in the US. India is seen as becoming a more confident country, more self-assured. It's a growing economy. It is pulling its weight on the world stage and becoming indispensable in some ways to resolving global issues. What are you supposed to make of the change in the mindset, in the way the Indian diaspora relates to India when it comes to the economy or its role in geopolitics?
That's right, Ramesh. It's a very informed diaspora here in the United States. In particular, we have to understand that, in fact, they're also very prosperous, they're educated in healthcare, in information technology. Their contribution is, in fact, higher than many other sections of population in the United States. And the particular aspects that you mentioned, that the rise of India that is being witnessed on the global stage, the rise of India within the country in terms of the economic prosperity that is reaching more and more people, they say that it adds to their confidence of carrying that brand India with them, whether it is the strength of the passport, whether it is an association with their leader. The many say that many foreigners recognize them by saying that, oh, so you are from the country represented by Prime Minister Modi. We see him on many global stages. India hosted the G20. All of these events and milestones have greatly contributed to the rise of India's stature on the global stage, and the manner in which the trickle-down impact and each individual Indian American also experiences that sense of empowerment, that sense of prosperity, that sense of stature. So that's what they shared, most of them, when they spoke about the manner in which India is rising under leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. They also referred to the manner in which in the American political system, and mind you, the Indian American population, if we compare it with the population of United States, a very small percentage, about 2% of the American population. But the great significant percentage of contribution that they're making to the Indian economy in key areas, as I mentioned earlier, in healthcare, education, in IT, their own stature, despite being small in number, it adds significantly to their confidence about India and their aspirations ahead. The number of Indian Americans who've made a name in Indian political system. Earlier, just before President Donald Trump came into power, there was Vice President Kamala Harris who had Indian roots. There's so many leaders and their families who have Indian roots in the new administration. So in that sense, there is also a sense that the American administration, especially President Trump's administration, takes that very, very optimistic and positive view of what Indians and Indian Americans bring to the table. And that adds to their sense of belonging, the sense of confidence, and their sense of dedicating themselves also to the prosperity of America. So that's an interesting aspect. When your country grows, your confidence grows, and you're able to contribute and with greater energy and with greater focus in also taking the ties between India and the US forward.
Right, a quick recap of the latest news. As my colleague Shubhendu is reporting, Prime Minister Modi has reached the White House for a meeting with President Trump. And in the last several hours, we've seen him hold more meetings with members of the Trump 2.0 cabinet, including Elon Musk, Ramaswamy, Tulsi Gabbard, the intelligence chief of the US, and also the NSA Mike Waltz. He'll also be meeting several others in the hours ahead. And also we're told that the one-on-one meeting between the two principals has begun. We'll get you the latest visuals of that meeting in just a bit. And while we wait for our guests to join, Shubhendu, we've discussed so far about the diaspora, defense ties, energy ties. Let me now pull up some more news for our viewers, and this time let's focus on trade. Now, the US is the largest trading partner of India. The total bilateral trade in goods and services was $199.1 billion in 2023. Talking about some more details about trade, if I can pull up some more data for our viewers. Now, during 2023-24, the US was the third largest source of FDI into India, with inflows of $4.99 billion, accounting for almost 9% of total FDI equity inflows. Established in 2005, the India-US Trade Policy Forum discusses market access and trade-related matters. The 14th such forum was held in New Delhi in January 2024. An India-US commercial dialogue focuses on cooperation in standards, ease of doing business, travel and tourism, and other important issues of commercial significance. It's co-chaired by India's Commerce Minister and the US Secretary of Commerce. The fifth commercial dialogue was held in New Delhi on 10th March 2023. Established in 2005, the India-US CEO Forum meets on the sidelines of the commercial dialogue and submits recommendations to the commercial dialogue as well. The CEO Forum was held in March 2023 in New Delhi. A joint working group on information and communications technology was set up in 2005 to bring together government and industry from both sides to discuss about cooperation in electronics and IT services. Last but not the least, led by India's Finance Minister and the US Treasury Secretary, the 9th Ministerial US Economic and Financial Partnership Dialogue was held in New Delhi in November 2022. And India joined the launch of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework in May 2022 along with 13 partner countries. Talking about trade, Shubhendu, what are some of the outstanding issues that we might encounter in the days ahead, and what do both sides, or how do both sides seek to overcome those hurdles?
Right, Ramesh, first compliments to you for in a very, very comprehensive manner. You presented the key milestones and the key highlights of India-United States trade relations. Yes, the US happens to be the largest trading partner of India. Initial years, we saw that position was taken by China, but in the recent days and years, it's the United States that is the largest trading partner of India in goods and services alike. But at the same time, when we look at the trade volumes, there is also concern about the trade deficit. Now, India has a surplus trade of about upwards of $40 billion. But this trade deficit for United States is a matter of concern given the certain tariff diplomacy that President Trump is focusing on lately. But that is also likely to be resolved through many different ways. There are ways in which trade deficits can be dealt with. You increase the overall volume of the trade. President Trump has already spoken about his expectations that defense equipments in particular could be increased as far as India's purchase from United States is concerned. There again, there is a certain issue of strategic autonomy that India would like to exercise. India is interested in advanced defense equipments, but it also wants to invest in co-development, co-production in the country where the best of America and India can work together in India to take it forward. So while the focus is going to be the highlights of the trade relations, it would be interesting to watch how the areas of strain are ironed out by the leaders, particularly vis-a-vis deficits and the tariff push that President Trump has been working on for the past some time. Is China that is facing the brunt as of now. Also the countries that export aluminium and steel to the United States, Canada being one of the leading countries that is going to be affected by those tariffs. But how does it play out with India? We'll have to wait and watch. It will be interesting. But yes, this trade partnership also forms the bedrock as far as the engagement between these two very exciting economies are concerned. One, the world's largest economy, and the other, one of the world's fastest growing large economies. So in that sense, all eyes on the manner in which these two leaders, when they meet today, how do they focus on those areas of concern? The engagement is already deep. Those areas of concern, an optimistic, productive, positive focus on that would go a long way in taking India-US ties forward.
Absolutely, Shubhendu. Now that we've discussed about trade as well, I'm told we're joined by our guest, Professor W.P.S. Sidhu. Dr. Sidhu is joining us from New York. He's the Center for Global Affairs at New York University. Professor Sidhu, welcome to this special broadcast. Good to have you join this discussion. Now, I was discussing with my colleague Shubhendu in DC about trade ties. Your thoughts on the way forward in tackling some of the outstanding issues insofar as trade is concerned?
Ramesh, wonderful to be here again, and good morning to you and your viewers there. Clearly, trade is going to be a very central aspect of this discussion between at the bilateral level. As we know, President Trump has taken a very, very particularly aggressive attitude towards trade in general and tariffs in particular. He's already, threatened some of his closest trading partners, but also a country like China, with which, they have a very different kind of competitive relationship as well. So in that context, I think, Prime Minister Modi is also landing on the day that President Trump is going to outline his reciprocal tariff idea. As we heard from your colleague, clearly India has been very aware of this and in some ways already preparing for some of this as well. The reduction of duties on American-made motorcycles is a very interesting approach. In the same context, the conversation now with Elon Musk is going to be equally important, particularly if it leads to the manufacturing of Tesla cars in India. It would raise the question of, will these cars also be impacted by tariff, especially if they're coming into the United States, or are they only meant for the Indian market? There are different ways that India and the US can approach this, but I broadly agree that it's likely to be much, much more cooperative, much, much more convivial, than the kind of more threatening tones that we've heard. And there are already various ways that this might work out. One of them is India stepping up its import of liquefied natural gas from the United States. I believe it's at about 6% of India's total requirements at the moment, and there's talk of doubling that to about 15%, or more than doubling it to about 15% or so. So there are ways that I think this trade aspect could be addressed by both sides. And clearly, the bonhomie on both sides is adequate to want to try and address that.
Talking about trade, Professor Sidhu, if I may quickly recap what a US official has said in the run-up to the Modi-Trump meeting. I'm quoting or paraphrasing from a news report. It highlights or flags 5 different issues. One, it talks about the US wanting to bring down the US trade deficit with India, number 1. Number 2, it's hoping for a fair bilateral trade deal. Number 3, to build on defense sales. Number 4, prioritizing American technology. And last but not the least, signing a new defense framework. Your thoughts on the bridging the trade deficit and this new trade deal that's in the works?
Well, certainly, I think if you look at point number 3 and point number 5 of that list that you've just shared with us, it's quite clear that India is very keen on diversifying its defense procurement worldwide. It certainly does not want to be beholden only to Russia or even to France. And certainly, as we've again heard from your colleague and others as well, there is a lot of attraction towards US defense equipment and deals. There are, of course, 3 issues there. Number 1, cost. Number 2, transfer of technology. And number 3, that there is some equipment that the United States is not going to be comfortable selling to India. It's only reserved for the closest allies. And India does not obviously fall into that category. And so that may be a little bit of a challenge. But that being said, we've already sort of seen areas where you can see India stepping up its defense procurement from the United States, and the desire on the part of the United States also to either co-produce or indeed sell in that area. So I think that could very well be linked up with this closer defense cooperation that is being talked about. The other idea may also be for the US and India to manufacture together to sell to third countries. This is not a new idea. It's an idea which has been around for decades, and it may be worth thinking about and reviving in many different ways as well. Simply to put this into context, I mean, if you look, for example, at the India-US bilateral trade and the India-China bilateral trade, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the deficit is far less with the United States than it is with China. And there, I think there's a greater possibility of that deficit being balanced with the United States than it is necessarily with China. And clearly what's important from the statement that you just read out, that not only is the United States keen on ensuring this kind of cooperation, they're also laying out a very clear pathway as to how this might move forward.
Right. If I may take a moment to welcome our second guest joining us on this special broadcast. We have with us Mr. Akshat Singh, an Associate Fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Mr. Singh, welcome to this special broadcast. I don't know whether you could hear me talk to Professor Sidhu there, but we're discussing about 2 key issues confronting India and the US. One was trade and the other is defense. A third, possibly proverbial elephant in the room, would be the Indo-Pacific Code for China, some would say. And in that context, if I can repeat what a US official has said in a media briefing just a short while ago, the official says they expect continued cooperation with India on potential Chinese security issues. What might they be?
Ramesh, I was very keenly and intently listening to the conversation, and I agree with whatever Professor said. I feel one thing that we need to understand with the bilateral partnership moving forward is that it will be based on the premises of reciprocity and immediate reciprocity, right? Until now, the US foreign policy was hinged on long-term strategic vision, where US, through its instruments and agencies such as USAID, would try to establish cordial relationships with the country. And try to bargain those cordial relationships 15, 20 years in the future. Now we will move towards, at least for the duration of the next administration, move towards a phase where the relationship between countries will be extremely, extremely reciprocal. Now, on the subject of China, China cannot be looked at in isolation. China cannot be looked at as just China, right? China needs to be understood in the context of larger Indo-Pacific and the historical context that has already been set. Now, when I think about US, India, and China, and the partnership between these three countries, I think of a seesaw, right? These three countries can be placed at any position in that seesaw. And the minute two countries start getting closer, the third country feels alienated and starts acting out. Currently, US and India are getting closer, which of course puts China at unease. A few months ago, when India and China signed the border deal, trying to ease off some of the tensions out there, Washington started getting a little worried and angsty. Similarly, if US and China go back to the era under President Obama and start getting a little cozy, it will naturally cause some discomfort in India. Now, one natural thing that we need to understand is, number one, China is aggressive, and China continues to be aggressive despite repeated preferences and despite repeated attempts of the global world order to bring it into the fold, right? We saw under President Obama this mindset about how if China is made part of a globalized world, it will start behaving a little better, but that didn't really happen. China has openly desecrated agreed upon conventions such as the UN Convention on Law of the Seas. China is in active territorial expansion, trying to cover territories of Bhutan, trying to cover territories of India, and simultaneously expanding in the Indo-Pacific as well. However, if we start thinking about decoupling from China, it is not a 5-year project. It is not a 10-year project. China has gained strategic advantage in some critical areas, and taking that advantage back will require not only bilateral but multilateral cooperation, which brings me to the subject of Quad. There have been repeated attempts under at least the past 3 to 4 administrations to strengthen bodies to compete against China in strategic areas. When we talk about emerging technology, we think about 3 different components of emerging technology, right? We think about AI, which is dependent on semiconductors and chips. We talk about electric vehicles, which is dependent on motors and permanent magnets. And we talk about critical minerals. And across these 3 areas, China has gained an upper hand. Perhaps in the subject of chips, most of it is concentrated in Taiwan, but China is already moving towards good infrastructural design, good chip design. And therefore, combating China is not going to be a 5-year project. Combating China is going to be a multi-generational project. The people who think that people thinking China is aggressive are China hawks are wrong. China is a real threat, and this threat will need to be addressed if we want to maintain the global liberal world order that we currently live in.
Fair enough. Professor Sidhu, talking about the Indo-Pacific, India will host the Quad Summit later this year, and President Trump can be expected to visit India for that summit. Given Trump 1.0's predisposition to China and all things China, especially given the security strategy and the defense policy unveiled in Trump 1.0, can we expect the Trump 2.0 to build on that going forward, and what would that mean for India and the world at large?
Ramesh, that's an excellent question, and I think I'd like to contextualize this. I think you
Sure.
had mentioned this in one of your earlier programs as to how it was in fact President Trump who had revived the Quad. And then, of course, President Biden, in his presidency, took it much further and much faster and much deeper than it has ever been before. And I think President Trump coming back to that is really going to build on that in the context of the Quad as being something which is forward-looking, is a good news, and in some ways also a different kind of partnership. The alliance model of NATO is now passé, certainly even within Washington, D.C., as we just heard from Vice President J.D. Vance, as to their take on what NATO's position would be, for example, on Ukraine. And so I think it's very important to keep that in mind as we talk about how the Quad is now rising in prominence. And let me articulate for you 3 or 4 elements of why the Quad is already become significant. Number one, at the inauguration, where Foreign Minister Jaishankar was there was already a Quad foreign ministers meeting. This, I believe, was even before any similar meeting with any of the US allies, and certainly including NATO as well. Number two, the first visitor to come to the Trump White House was the Japanese Prime Minister. And that again underlines, if you like, the priority that this administration is putting on the Indo-Pacific. And it is no coincidence that the fourth world leader to attend or be in Washington, D.C. is, of course, Prime Minister Modi. So it is all very much building up towards reinforcing the idea of the Quad, and really kind of putting Indo-Pacific up front and center. That being said, I think it's also very important to recognize that the 4 members have very different approaches towards China. As you know, the common phrase that you see in all of the joint statements is a free, fair, open Indo-Pacific for everybody. But beyond that, India certainly is not in the business of containing China. It cannot, as we've heard, the limitations of that as well. But it also does not want to do that. It probably wants to manage China, which is why it remains, in some ways engaged with China through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or the BRICS and the BRICS Plus as well. Now, the United States may have a more different dynamic with China. And there, India can certainly go along on the global dimensions of the India-China competition, if you like. But I don't think that is going to necessarily benefit the India-China bilateral competition, or indeed even the regional competition vis-a-vis China's role and engagement in Pakistan as well. So clearly, President Trump may have an expansionist idea of Quad vis-a-vis China, but I think it may well be limited to what the other 3 partners are likely to do. And we've already seen an indication of that in the creation of the AUKUS, which is the Australia, UK, and US partnership to build nuclear-powered submarines, where India, either by accident or design, is not part of that discussion at the moment. So I think we will probably see the Quad's ideas being reinforced. But what will remain a little bit of a question mark in the summit going forward is whether the defense leg or the military or the security leg of the Quad is going to be reinforced, or will Quad remain that broad kind of dialogue which looks right from outer space to 5G technology to health and even climate change concerns being addressed together. That remains a big question mark.
Indeed. Professor Sidhu, you've given us a lot of talking points. They will come to some of them in just a bit. Professor Sidhu, Mr. Singh, do stay on. I'll also ask my colleague Shubhendu to stand by. We'll come back to you momentarily. Let me pull up some more news for the benefit of our viewers tuning in. And this has to do with the meetings that have already taken place this morning in Washington, D.C. To begin with,